We have a terrific afternoon keynote address coming up. I would like to introduce Dr. Michael Hynes, who is the superintendent of schools in Patchogue, Medford. He is an incredibly innovative public school advocate. He's been a TEDx talk speaker, a university lecturer, and he's made incredible contributions regarding the importance of play, recess, mental health in schools, and yoga and mindfulness in the classroom. I heard Dr. Hynes speak last year at the Healthy Long Island Conference, and what impressed me most about him was both his personal story and his personal journey, and his vision that we need a holistic approach to educating children, one that addresses the social, emotional, physical, and cognitive development of students. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hynes.
Okay. Thank goodness I went after lunch and not before lunch. That's always the hardest thing to do. And for those of you, well, actually, there are a lot of familiar faces here, so I just want to say hi to all of my East End friends. I used to be the superintendent in Shelter Island a few years ago, so I see some familiar faces. And also, I remember my ride coming out here from Western Suffolk, so I was having flashbacks as I was driving. I forget how beautiful it is out here. Not that it's not beautiful where I am, it's just totally different. I just want to start by saying I can't believe I'm here right now because I feel like I'm speaking to my people. Like, this is as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned, because I'm wearing multiple hats right now. I'm wearing the hat as an educator or of an educator. I'm wearing the hat of a parent of 5. By the way, I'd like to give one away. If any of you are interested, please let me know. I have lots of kids, ages 16, 13, 12, 5, and 3. Okay, yes, exactly, which brings me to, over here. Hold on. Hold on one sec. This just shows you how life is. I knew that was going to happen. The slide that's going to come up is the slide of my wife, who is going to be sainted at some point. Let's see if it works. There you are. And this ring, I think she can hear me. How you doing, honey? So there's a picture of you up here right now. My wife, Erin, is a remarkable woman, and clearly I would not be able to do anything, not only in school but in life, without her support. She's an assistant superintendent of schools in Sachem. Now, for those of you who know about Sachem, it's the second largest suburban school district in New York, so it's pretty large. So she is wonderful, and she is my backbone. And we have the same philosophy as far as what we do at home. By the way, just a disclaimer, I'm a vegan. So any vegans in the house? That's right, baby. And I was the same before. Before that, I was a vegetarian for over 25 years. And it's a funny story, but I'm not going to share it right now. But every time I'm sitting in a presentation, I'm always wondering, like, all right, what's this person going to say? How long is it going to be? And then what can I actually bring home and use from this presentation? So I just wanted to outline this for you. And I also wanted to contextualize how as a school district we got to where we are. Because it's a journey. And it needs to be a patient journey. I am not a patient person. I call it the trifecta. I'm German, Italian, and Irish. There is no patience here whatsoever. I'm always in the 3-point stance. If I'm a gear shift, I'm always in 5th gear, you know. And so what we have to do if we're going to promote these things in schools, we have to know how to shift gears. That's very important. You can't always be in 5th gear. So for today, I want to talk about the importance of, and I know you know this already, not only of recess and movement and why that's so important to children, but what play-based education means, what we can do within schools, the science and the research behind it. And it's not rocket science, by the way. And we did it many, many years ago. And there are reasons why it has been taken away. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about yoga and mindfulness and what that means not only for kids, but just as important for the staff, because where we are, we want to make sure those opportunities are for the staff as well, and that includes myself. I have a mindfulness coach because I need a lot up here, someone working with me. And some of you may know this gentleman, Corey Mascara. So Corey works with me personally. I'm very, very fortunate and very broke, by the way. But it's totally worth it. The return on that investment, I think, is hopefully working out. And then I want to talk about PEAS, as was mentioned before. It's an acronym that's very simple. It stands for physical growth, emotional growth, academic growth, and social growth. As far as what we're thinking about as a school district and the holistic nature of it, each portion or each part or component is just as important as the other, meaning that we're not just focusing on academics and academics alone. That's not how we operate. Anyway, we're going to talk about whole child education. I want to talk about the plan that we had when I first went to Patchogue Medford. There was no plan. I'm going to be honest with you. Most school districts, I'm not saying out here, but I'm saying most school districts and superintendents and people I've spoken with, if there is a 3 or a 5-year plan, it's something, as educators, you know, it goes on the shelf. We don't look at it for a very, very long time. Nobody knows what it is. It's important to have something in writing to know where you're going, and more importantly, to really, as Dr. Phil would say, look in the mirror and know where you currently are. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And then finally understand why it works. But it is all about perspective, and knowing the audience or the arena in which I'm talking to or with is really important. So there are very like-minded individuals here, or you wouldn't be here. But usually when I talk about these things, if I go to speak in front of the commissioner, or if I speak in front of other public school advocates who really want to focus on academic growth, what I'm about to say rarely, or in some ways, doesn't resonate with them. But it is all about perspective, right? And I'm asking you to suspend certainty to the best of your ability when it comes to some of the things that I'm saying. Because you may see two different things here, right? You're going to see either good. Raise your hand if you see good. Okay, raise your hand if you see evil. Okay, please leave. Get out. Okay, so anyway, we can all be looking at, that was my impersonation of Poltergeist. No, what was it? Amityville Horror. Perspective is very important, and we all bring different perspectives, biases, and assumptions. I'm going to ask you to suspend most of them. And most things, when we hear about education, we only focus on two things, or the news usually focuses on two things. Student outcomes, what are student test scores, and then system outcomes, how good is a school district doing? But they rarely look below the surface, or if they do, they'll talk about it very superficially. That's inequity and inequality as far as what's happening within schools, as far as resources are concerned. Social stress, toxic stress, which I'm sure I think was spoken about earlier today, and violence, support for schools, and then finally support for young families. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. My Board of Education is ridiculous, and I mean that in a good way. My Board of Education, as crazy as I am, they are just as crazy and passionate about kids and making sure policies are in place that promotes wellness. And they're very vocal about it, which is somewhat untraditional. This is the Board of Education, and a lot of the things that we do within the school district, there needs to be a lot of congruence between the superintendent and the board. Because if there's dissonance, it's very difficult to move an agenda forward. Or if you do move it forward, it won't be sustained. And that is something is you want that. You want whatever you're looking to do to be sustained. Our school community, just to contextualize ours, if you took New York State and shrunk it down, you would find Patchogue Medford as far as diversity, socioeconomic status, everything else. So my belief is what we're doing where we are, potentially, and I say potentially, you can scale up. I truly believe that. Maybe not all of it, but certain portions of it I think you can scale up. So when from Shelter Island and believe me, you go from Shelter Island to Patchogue Medford, that's like going, from Rhode Island to California. It's a big, big difference. And some of it's positive and some of it is some of the things you have to figure out. But when I went there was no plan whatsoever. And I think the last time the vision and the mission statements were even looked at was when Reagan was in the White House. So I think there were 48 stars in the flag when we looked at some of the other policies that were drawn up. So there was a lot of things that were old, and you have to be willing to turn over some of those rocks and say, all right, so what needs to be changed? There was no graduate profile. And I think most importantly, there was no identity. Because if you're going to move a system or a classroom or a building forward, you do want to hang your hat on something as far as an identity and what you stand for. What you stand for is extremely important. So the question is, what's our focus? And in many ways, I find many school systems, that's part of my wife calling me, sorry. Hi, Erin. She's jealous that I'm out here right now. Many school systems, they try to get to the end of the week, they try to get to the end of the month, and then they try to get to the end of the year with very little planning in place. And that's at a national level, I think it's at a state level, and I think just as important, it's at the local level. So the question becomes, what is your focus? For us, it's whole child education, which I will try to clearly define. But our nation, our state has become so obsessed with ranking and sorting kids and standardizing everything that this is what you get, right? So there was a huge study with the Council of Big City Schools a few years ago, and what they have, I want to say, articulated and freed for everyone to understand is that on average, students take 112 standardized tests throughout their lifetime from pre-K to 12th grade. That's standardized tests. We're not talking formative and summative and teacher quizzes. We're talking standardized tests, which equates to almost 40 school days over a child's lifetime. Now, I know you know this already, but we are serving in schools, or maybe you have children too, right? This is a generation, as Dr. Peter Gray would say from Boston College, that are more anxious, depressed, and suicidal than any generation before. That's a fact. So the question becomes, what are we doing different? Are we just tweaking around the edges, or are we doing things different systemically within our schools to address those needs? Because we have many, I don't care where they're coming from, Nassau County, Gold Coast, Patchogue, Medford, somewhere in between maybe. These kids are very anxious, depressed, and suicidal for a multitude of reasons. And we need to figure out what to do. Students are within our care for over 14,000 hours over their lifetime. That is a lot of time to influence and to make positive connections with kids. 14,000 hours. However, if we continue to teach in an industrial type model, like factory workers, where kids are widgets and we're standardizing them, that is not an experience I think that children should have in this day and age. And I think most of you would agree. So the process that we moved forward was clearly defining, and this is where I get myself into some trouble. Bless you. What I don't believe in is that every child should go to college. I don't believe every child needs to go to college at all. And I'm really not saying that in a pandering way, so thank you. I'm glad some of you agree to that, because for some reason we have this love affair with, if you don't go to college, you are worthless or you have failed. And that is not true at all, because I just paid my plumber about $400 to come in for about an hour, right? I mean, if you know Mike Rowe and you watch his shows, he always talks about the skills shortage and about how there are so many jobs that are out there, but we have kids who are not, prepared. So what are we doing internally to prepare kids? And some of you are probably going, all right, well, what does this have to do with eating and recess? I promise you, I'm gonna pull it together. But there are so many spokes on this wheel. I just want to, at least from 30,000 feet, try to address some of them. what we've done is talk about, and we still have a long way to go, by the way. This just because we're saying it doesn't mean we're fully 100% operational. But when it comes to being college ready, to being workforce ready, and or going to the military, what are we doing internally to prepare those kids? But to change something is very hard to do, and I'm going to tell you right now, for the educators who are here, I know you would know this, and you would agree with this. It's like when you know what the Heisman Trophy looks like, right? This. Okay, so when you want to start something new, usually the first reaction is this, right? It's like no. And then it's not only no, it's here are the top 10 reasons why it's no. And it's like the Dead Sea Scrolls roll out. Well, you can't do it because of contracts. You can't do it because you're going to be sued. You can't do it because, well, you just can't do it. And you also can't do it because we've done it this way for 40 years, right? Did I get an amen? Oh, wait, no, I'm just kidding. So you know what I'm talking about. So what John Cotter from Harvard talks about is an 8-step process. And what we try to do in my school district is utilize that process. I'm not going to go through the whole process because I'll put you to sleep, especially after lunch. I'll just talk to you about the first one, which is create a sense of urgency. Create a sense of urgency that says, Houston, we have a problem, but just as important, we also have a solution. And what you have to do is cobble together some teams to move whatever it is you want to move forward. And you follow this process. His book is called Our Iceberg is Melting. It's a wonderful, very short book, maybe 100 pages. It's about a bunch of penguins. Those penguins have roles. I don't care if you're in school district A, B, or C. It talks about people. One of the people is called no-no. All right, so there's a no-no in every school district or in every school. And maybe they're the principal or the superintendent or a board member, you don't know. But how do you deal with the no-nos and everybody else, okay? So that's what we did. Second, what we did was we actually asked ourselves, who are we and what do we stand for? Who are we and what do we stand for? What are our core values? Don't go over 3, as Steve Jobs would say, right? Keep it really, really simple and define those core values. We also believe, however, at the time, that there was a wrong paradigm, and this cartoon is the best. It says, you're going to have to change to fit into the system, but the circles are saying, or how about you change the system so we can all fit? And that's what we have to do. And that's what some of us are doing right now, probably in pockets. But the question becomes, how do you do it as a system? How do you do it as a state? And just as important, how do you do it as a nation? I don't believe students are standardized. Like I said, I have 5 children. They're all completely different, right? If you have children, you know they're completely different, and we want to honor and respect that. That's the beauty of children. And the same thing comes to adults. You are not all the same, thank goodness. We created a new vision. We brought together some people. We kept the vision very, very simple. And what the vision is, we want to create learning opportunities that cultivate talents to make sure we realize everyone's unique potential, because everyone's different. Everyone has potential. I went to school when I was in K through 12. I talk about this in my TED Talk very quickly. I loved elementary school. I hated junior high. I had sun in my hair. Anybody have sun in? Okay, good, thank you. I feel better. I feel vindicated. Brown hair plus sun in equals orange streak. I had braces, so my teeth were out to here. I could open stuff, and it was not easy, right? And then when I graduated high school, I graduated in the bottom 10% because I was so disenfranchised, right? So that's about relationships. That's about a whole bunch of things. The reason why I say that is when many children leave school, they don't know what they're good at, and they don't know how good they can be at something. So it's our job to make sure they do know that before they leave. We have a new mission. The mission is about creating multiple pathways for kids, like I said before. Not all kids are going to college. It's totally cool. Well, if you're not going to college, what can we do to help you? If you're going to the military, you take something called the ASVAB, right? It's an entrance exam. What can we do to make sure that you're going to maximize those scores? And then we asked the staff, what's the purpose of education? And I think all of you can relate to this, right? You go back, this is the one thing we all have in common. We all went to school, right? We all went to school. I'm sure if I ask you your favorite teacher, if you remember, if you got bullied, you go back in time like a wormhole and you remember, right? But I think as educators, we rarely ask ourselves, what is the purpose? Besides the fact it's the law that students have to be in school, what is the real purpose of it? And how do we then create a system that really is correlated with those things? A lot of us don't think about it, because if you go into a school right now, many of them, all you got to do is make that picture a color, and they're sitting in rows. Same thing from 100 years ago. Plato said the purpose is, or the object of education is to teach us what is beautiful. That's nice, but you can't measure it, and everybody wants to measure everything. So you can't measure beautiful. I can't tell my wife, well, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, you're like a 4.5. I would be in, I'd be in jail probably. I'd be in trouble. Then I ask, well, what's the purpose of life? Because being in school, you being here right now, is all about living at some point. What's the purpose of life? Well, what's the meaning of life? I don't know. The computers are down. Because the problem is we're so reliant on technology. And that journey inward, this journey inward within our bodies, is just as important as that journey outward. And what does that mean? Picasso had it right. I love this. He says, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. I mean, how beautiful is that? That's the purpose of teachers. Teachers connect with kids. They form relationships. They have things that they're sharing, whether it's content-wise or anything else. They move forward. Their purpose is to move kids from here to here by the end of the year, and not just with test scores. This is my favorite. When you type in famous people who didn't like school, these are the two people who pop up. My favorite, Paul McCartney, back when he had a beard, when he was, well, he's still cool now. And then you have Celine Dion. Lots of famous people did not like school. I don't know if you knew that. I don't even know if you care, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because there's a couple people here that I found it very, very interesting. Einstein said, education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in school. That is not a ringing endorsement, nor is it in fact nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of education have not yet strangled the holy curiosity of inquiry. How crazy is that? You can actually almost say that today, 70 plus years later. Or what about, bless you, what about Mark Twain? I have never let schooling interfere with my education. One of the best children's writers of all time. Thank goodness I was never sent to school. It would have rubbed off some of my originality. Margaret Mead, we know a lot of her famous sayings, but I don't know if you know this one. My grandmother wanted me to have an education, so she kept me out of school. So some of you may know who Sir Ken Robinson is, the most famous TED Talker of all time. 300 million views of his TED Talks. He has several of them. He talks about a lot of different things, divergent thinking, all these great things. He's actually coming to Patchogue, Medford on November 15th. There are some tickets. I think there's like 20 tickets available. If you go on our website, there's a link. It's free. There's no charge. If you would like to go, you're certainly welcome. We have about 900 people attending. He is, for me, there's the Holy Trinity, right? You have, I probably shouldn't say that here anyway. Sorry. You have Ken Robinson, you have Pasi Sahlberg from Finland, and then you have Dr. Peter Gray. But Ken Robinson says, the gardener does not make a plant grow. The job of the gardener is to create optimal conditions. And that's where we come in. So what can we control? There's a lot of things we can't control, but there are some things we certainly can control. And one of them is creating those conditions. Now, I don't know about you, if there's any school psychologists here, cover your ears. I don't believe in the bell curve. Just don't. I don't believe in it when it comes to potential. And what I mean by that is most of us are average, okay, or the majority of us, right? Because here's what happens. Kids go into school, and then right away, for the most part, we're going to have the same A's to F's, B's to D's, and then everyone else is Johnny or Jill C average. Now, if I said that to all of you, let's just say you're all teachers, and I said, listen, some of you are exceptional. Some of you shouldn't even have a job because you stink. And then most of you are, you're okay. I wouldn't make it to my car, right? Or if I say to you, if this is all parents, listen, some of you are great parents. Some of you really should, I'm calling CPS. And the rest of you are, yeah, you're okay. That would not fly. Yet for some reason, we have this love affair with the bell curve, and we rank and sort kids right away. And I just don't believe in that, which is, I promise I'm getting to recess and eating. You're like, come on, man, please. But everything is about balance, whether it's in your life, your personal life, whether it's in a school, whether it's in your body itself, right? It's all about balance, because we're all a bunch of systems enveloped in subsystems. I don't know about you, but when I get sick, I'm the biggest baby on the planet. Well, actually, most guys are, I would think. I'm not saying all guys, but I'm saying most guys. So if I have a headache, it's going to interfere with the way that I work. If my stomach's not feeling well, it's going to interfere. All these systems need to be in balance. Yet for some reason, schools are the complete opposite. There are so many subsystems in schools, but they're completely out of whack. They're completely out of whack because we don't focus on what kids eat. We don't focus on kids moving. We don't focus on what's happening up here from a mental standpoint. There's a lot of things we don't focus on. We focus on tests. We focus on curriculum. And we need to, but it's not the only thing that should get us up in the morning. That's just what a school system looks like. I don't want to bore you with that. But here's, as my old friend would say, here's the dealio. Our job is to take your talent, our talent as educators, help people, and then you find what your purpose is. And when you do that, life changes. So the reason why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing is I shadow kids every single year, K through 12, meaning for a full day, I pretend I'm a kindergartner. I dress up like a kindergartner. And when I get home, I hook up like an IV drip, and I can't move because I'm exhausted. It's a completely different experience than when we were in school. Some of you maybe have only been out of school for 10, 15 years. Myself, certainly a lot longer. It is not the same. And if we're going to change a system, we have to see what they're contending with or what they are enduring. And when you shadow kids, you see in real time what their thoughts are, what they would like to see, and they give wonderful suggestions. I also meet with kids in a couple of different ways. I have roundtables. I meet with fifth graders. That means because it's K through 5, it's 6 years in school, right? At the end of the year, their fifth grade experience, I want to know what's working, what's not working. What are their thoughts around it? And they share, I can't tell you some of the things they share because being recorded. Some of the things they share are beyond insightful. Same with 8th graders, because that's when they're ending their middle school journey, and then seniors. Seniors, it's like no holds barred. There's like no filter. And they share it. And they give some really wonderful suggestions. And a lot of those suggestions, I think, have been talked about this morning, and some of you are very passionate about. So here's what I found. Kids need to move a lot. They need to move a lot. In Finland, yes, you didn't care, any of you care, they teach for 45 minutes. Kids go outside for 15 minutes. Teach for 45 minutes, they go outside for 15 minutes. They do it 4 times a day. They're like, we're teaching, get outside. I don't care if it's freezing. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if there's a tornado. I don't know if there's tornadoes in Finland. They're going outside because they need to move. And here's the other thing. They're not really supervised. And it's mixed age levels. So I'm going to Finland next week. Actually, I'm going to Finland Saturday. And I'm watching firsthand kindergarten through 5th grade. I'm watching middle school. I'm watching high school. I'm watching their CTE program. I'm working with the Finnish ministry, policy-wise, to see what they're doing. They're way ahead of us in some ways. In some ways, they're way behind. But there are a lot of things we can do here. Moving is one of them. Children need time to play and explore. Play-based learning. I don't know about you, when you were in elementary school, you probably had Lincoln Logs, you probably had blocks, right? For Montessori teachers who were here, you probably had, self-directed learning. They want to do things on their own. A lot of kitchen sets. When I first went to Patchogue Medford, they were all thrown away, like they were gone. It was like walking into cell block C. It was like the warden with the skeleton key. Like there was nothing there because we're so focused on academics for 4 and 5-year-olds, which is clinically insane, by the way, with a capital C. Capital C. Tower gardens, hydroponic gardens, we have them in all of our schools. They are amazing. Hydroponic gardens are they're wonderful. The kids grow them. We put them in the cafeteria. We just got, I don't want to get emotional, we just got a capital reserve pass. The high school is getting a massive greenhouse for the first time. A huge greenhouse. It's beautiful. It's going to be operational by September. And the kids are going to be working in it. And the kids are going to have their own gardens where they're going to actually introduce food into the cafeteria. We have yoga and mindfulness. All right, so let me explain this because some of you are saying, oh yeah, yoga, that's great. Every school should have it, of course, or mindfulness, right? So first thing we did, because now you see the vision and the mission. So how do you introduce yoga and mindfulness? How do you sustain it? How do you people buy into it? Those are very important things. And then the last thing is, we have a lot of high school kids who choose not to eat lunch. They're choosing not to eat lunch because they want to take another AP class, because it'll boost up their grade point average. So here's what and I'm not saying, please don't take this the wrong way. I want kids to push themselves. But I don't believe taking 5 AP classes in 1 year and not having lunch, because this is what the day of a high school kid looks like who takes 4 to 5 AP classes. Because they're usually on a sport, right? They're usually in a club and an activity. So they'll start school at 7 o'clock. They'll get up actually at 5:15 to finish the homework from the night before, right? Then they'll start their day at 7:15. They'll sleepwalk into school. They'll go through all their AP classes. They won't have lunch. They'll have a club or an activity. They'll have a sport. They won't get home until like 7:30. Then they'll have 4 hours of homework. And then it's rinse and repeat. And then we go, well, I wonder why there's an anxiety, depression, suicide problem. I have no idea. So this is what's happening, and we have to think of systemically how we can change that narrative. So we developed a 5-year plan. Here are the shifts that have taken place over the past 5 years. We've doubled recess from 20 minutes to 40 minutes. They also have 40 minutes of lunch. So that means 80 minutes where we are not telling kids what to do. We tell them what to do from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed. You should wear this. You have to put this on. You have to go to this after, right? All day long, we're barking at them, telling them what to do. How do we have kids become independent and learn how to work with others? You give them 80 minutes to figure stuff out. That's extremely important. Now, some of you are saying, well, how the heck do you get away with it? My answer is, I have no idea. I mean, I do to some extent. The way you get around it is you provide people with research. And if you look at all the research, by the way, when it comes to recess, good luck finding any research that says it's not good for kids. If federal prisoners have 1 hour of free time outside, how in the hell do kids who are in elementary school only get 10 to 15 minutes? That to me is criminal. I mean, it's criminal. So that has made a big difference. We have seen discipline reduce significantly. We've seen attendance actually increase. We've increased unstructured play. That means throughout the day, kids have opportunities to, on their own, make decisions to have play-based activities within the classroom. Now, teachers were like, they're not going to be able to read. They're not going to be able to know their numbers because you're taking all this time away. You're doubling recess, that's 20 minutes. Now you want to have kids playing throughout the day, I'm going to kill you. Like, when are they going to learn? And the interesting thing is that the paradox of less is more totally takes place. Just because you're doing something all the time doesn't mean you're maximizing that time. If I take a lot of vitamin B12, after a while it's toxic and it's going to hurt. Yoga, meditation, we started this. I like to think we test drive things. We like to to try it out and see how it goes. So I asked a few different schools at the elementary level, a few different grade levels, you want to test drive yoga? Yes. By the end of the year, almost all the schools, we have 7 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 1 Big Mama high school, 2,700 kids. By the end, if we didn't have K through 8 yoga, my contract would not be renewed. Like, that's how people were excited about it. Project-based learning, I could talk about that all day. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Social emotional needs, we've added almost 6 social workers and psychologists over the past X amount of years. Because here's the traditional model. If you're in an elementary school, you're lucky if you have a half a social worker. You're lucky. You're lucky if you have a half a psychologist, but for the most part, the psychologist is doing a lot of testing. They're not doing a lot of counseling. So what we did was, for all 11 schools, we have a full-time social worker, full-time psychologist, and then some throughout. Very important that we move in that direction. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? All right, I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Ken Robinson talks about this, and I think this is going to resonate with you because it's an important study. So it's a longitudinal study that took place well before 1998. Now think about kindergartners, right? There's convergent thinking, divergent thinking. Convergent thinking, think of multiple choice tests. 1 question, 1 answer, right? Divergent thinking is real life, right? So you have 1 problem, multiple ways to attack that problem. That's real life. We need to provide more of those opportunities. Anyway, when lots of kindergartners in this study, about 1,500 I believe, were tested with divergent thinking skills, what percentage do you think scored at the genius level? Divergent thinking, 1 problem, multiple solutions to that problem. What percentage do you think scored at the genius level? Okay, I only have 10 minutes, so I'm just going to tell you. 98%. 98%. That's crazy, right? So let's take the same batch of kids, right? 5 years later, let's test them again. Do you think it went to 100%? No. 32%. Boom, in 5 years. That means they're in 4th grade. Here's the best part. No, actually, it's not the best part. 5 years later, they're tested again. Less than 10%. Now, Ken Robinson would say part of divergent thinking is the creativity aspect of it is being lost within the school years, within the 13 years kids are in school. But then they took 25-year-olds and they tested them with divergent thinking skills. It was less than 2%. Now, it's either kids get dumber as they go through school, which I don't think is the case, or there is something that's missing within our schools, and how do we bring those things back, right? So I'm not going to talk about, these are my favorite theorists, Maslow, Piaget, Erickson, Kohlberg, Gardner. I'm not going to talk about that now. We grow our own food. Wonderful. I actually steal a lot of it. I break in at night. I take all the lettuce. They're like, what happened? I'm like, I have no idea. And then it's wonderful. So those are some images of the Tower Gardens. We use social media a lot because, you know, what schools do, they're very good at closing their system off. They don't want people to know what's going on the inside. We do the complete opposite. We actually like to share what's happening on the inside, which can make us probably vulnerable in some ways, but we're very proud of that. We provide windows for not only parents, but for community members to see what's going on. Mr. Rogers, man, this guy is just the best. And if you saw that movie, I can cry thinking about that movie because it was so powerful. Not the Tom Hanks one that's coming out, the one that just came out. It's really remarkable. His definition of what play is spot on. Play is often talked about as if it were relief from serious learning, but for children, play is serious learning. Play is really the work of childhood, and schools have done a great job of making it almost extinct, and we need to bring it back. Images of kids playing within our school. We have divergent or play. We have a whole classroom where they just go in and they choose what they want to play with. Oh my gosh, Lincoln Logs. Those big foam things, huge structures. and then they talk about what they built, and then they use their imagination as far as what they do. There's some yoga that you can see, mindfulness, more K through 8. You know you're doing something either right or you're kind of like on the fringe when the New York State School Boards Association goes, can we use what you're doing in there? And that makes me a little nervous because I've been pushing back against not only them, but the State Superintendents Association as well. But it finally says recess gets respect, as it should. So these are some of the speakers we've had. Dr. Peter Gray, if you haven't watched his TED Talk on play, I highly suggest it. Extremely powerful. Extremely powerful, why it's important. Free range kids, if you know Lenore Skenazy, she talks about the Let Grow movement. Here's the problem with what's going on. I probably have like 4 minutes left, but I want to talk about this really quickly. We have this through K through 8 now in all of our schools. Think back to when you were 12 years old or 10 years old. Were you allowed to ride your bike more than 15 feet from your house? Were you allowed to actually maybe go to the store with your friends at age 11 or 12 and not have a microchip in your neck and everyone, GPS patterns where your kids are, right? So what we're doing for homework assignments is allowing our kids, I want our parents to think, try something that your parents were able to do when they were the same age. And the parents are like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you. Like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, the reason why it's called Let Grow is because we have not only the kids trying things that are new and different to help them become resilient and independent, but it's actually the parents are growing. Because I love our parents, I'm one of them. But we have suffocated and bubble wrapped our kids to the point where we are really short-circuiting their ability to be productive citizens and adults when they age out, unless you want them to live in your basement for the next 30 years, right? So these are some of the things that we're trying to do. Anyway, this is the formula for P's. Wellness is a huge part of it because our next step is to focus on what kids ingest, whether it's organic, whether it's removal of sugar. So I'm a vegan, and I am tried to remove all sugar from my diet. Man, that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But when I tried a little bit of sugar after not having it for 2 weeks, that was the scariest. My brain almost exploded. The power of sugar, and listen, like everything else in balance, it's great, but too much of it is horrific. And we do a very good job in schools making sure kids have too much sugar. This is the peas tree. It just conceptualizes for those of you who maybe want to understand the whole systemic underpinnings of what this means. It talks about it from a whole bunch of different levels. I'm going to end with Benjamin Bloom because a lot of us and a lot of you here serve kids who don't have a roof over their head, right? Their basic needs not being met. So here's the bottom line, especially when it comes to really good food. We have to make sure that kids feel safe, that they're loved, and they eat something really good for them. We have something called breakfast in the classroom, where every single kid eats communal before they start their day. Before they start their day, they're all eating the same thing. They have a choice of what to eat, but the kids who can't afford breakfast aren't, scooted out to the cafeteria with a big spotlight on them saying they can't afford it. So everybody eats together. One of the best things we've ever done because they're eating somewhat healthy foods, not 100%, but somewhat healthy foods. They're sharing an experience, and then they start their day in a very positive way. I can't underscore how important that is. If we are going to make sure our future citizens, that's like the Academy Awards, like when you hear the music come on, and then like the person's speaking too much and they have to come off when the PowerPoint goes, oh, that is great. Bye. No, yes, 5 minutes for questions, I got it. See, that's by design. I don't want any questions, so I'm going to keep talking. I'm just kidding. The thing that we have to understand is we have to address different spokes on this wheel. It's mental health, it's what kids eat, the experiences we provide from an academic standpoint. And so you can't do it without a plan. And I'm sure some of you are going, how do I, as an individual in a school, can I be the change within that arena? And the answer is, you can, but you have to be very strategic about it. Because I don't remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials, right? When E.F. Hutton, what happens? They listen, right? The principal, and I love principals, I know there's a few here, so I'm doing the icky shuffle like the tap dance, I'm going to be careful about that. The real leaders within schools are not really the principals. There are teacher leaders or other leaders within the school that you tap into. And if you really want change, you tap into those people to have enough to start moving things forward. That is where it starts. And then if you really want change, as an administrator, you become a superintendent and you work with the Board of Education. So that's all I have. I went a little bit longer, my apologies, but I thank you for enduring what I just talked about for quite some time. So I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Hi, thank you so much. I was just wondering if Patchogue Medford has responded to or would like to respond to the research about sleep and pushback start times for high school students?
Yes, it's a great question. So yeah, we know what the research says about sleep. The problem or the reason why we had to push back start time, by the way, for high school, we now start at like 7:15, whereas before it was more around 10 to 8, right? Is that the state, the way they go about accounting for instructional time has been completely different. So they audited school districts and they said, here are the parameters. You need 990 hours at the secondary school, right? So you have to figure out within those parameters, how are you going to make sure teacher contracts fall within those parameters, making sure transportation is allowable, you work all those routes out. And the bottom line is, when it came to the new start time, there was very little that we can do. Now, I will say, there are lots of high schools on Long Island, and I'm not saying I agree with it, that start at the same time. But it is a shock to a system for kids who are already not awake. I'm going to say other adults, too, who are not awake or ready to rock and roll at even 10 to 8, but to push it back to 7:15 is not fair. But unfortunately, because of the way that the state designed the new mandate, that was all we can do. If I was able to, because the commissioner is coming to Patchogue Medford November 30th, the commissioner of education. So she is like the superintendent of all 770 plus school districts in New York State, right? So when I sit down with her, I almost want to say, listen, can you give a few school districts 3 years to not follow all the mandates and allow us to operate independently, to try things that are new and different, right? And see if we can do that without being punished. And I'm hoping she says yes. And if that's the case, then we are going to totally look at start times for kids. Because I think it's Jericho or maybe a few other school districts in Nassau County that start a little bit later. But you have to understand the unintended consequences of that is that you have sports, right? So all sports have to be played. There are so many different factors that come in that we would have to contend with. But start times I would change in a heartbeat. It's something we didn't want to do. Oh, right next to you. Okay.
I just wondered, how is your, I guess your, I don't know, it's like your way or your technique or the way you are, how is that received with other superintendents?
Are you a superintendent?
I wish I was, but no. No, I've been teaching for 25 years, so you're the first person I've ever heard of that is doing something like this, and I applaud you for that. I really do, and I think probably the rest of us in the room do. But I can't see that.
Thank you.
I can't see that this is like very well received.
It really depends.
Widespread?
Well, widespread, it's starting to make traction. And first of all, it's not me who's doing the work. And I think any leader would say this. It's the people who are around them who are really doing a lot of the hard work. My job, remember Crazy Eddie, like those commercials, right? Great. I'm like the cheerleader in charge. My job is to get people on board to move a vision forward, right? Like an orchestra conductor. That's my job. But to have a very clear understanding of where we're going. And we do a pretty good job in our school district. But to answer your question, no, I probably wore a scarlet letter for the past 4 years. But I think it's starting to make traction around the state. And I think people are a little more open up. They're opening up to it now. But I will say the first 3 years, yeah, it was very difficult because, yeah, not that you second guess yourself, but you have a lot of people who just don't believe in it. And that's totally cool. It's the way people go about not agreeing with you that I'm not cool with. That makes sense. Yes, please. Sir. I thought you were going to ask what my salary was. I was going to say, I'm not telling. Yeah, so those hydroponic gardens, it's a lot of the cost is up front. So they're around $2,500 to get all the machinery, everything. You get the initial pods. And then from there, it's almost like if you're a teacher and you teach science, remember the science kits, right? You have to replenish whatever's in there. That's what really comes down to. So it's the upfront costs. And if you're interested, I can put you in touch with somebody who's amazing. And then she can get you reduced rates. Because, of course, like anything else, the more you buy of it, you know, the lower the cost. But we have them in all our schools. And actually, we add to that each year. So whereas we started initially with one in each school, now we have them all over the place. But it's the return on that investment, boy, I tell you what, it's the best. Ma'am? The hydroponic gardens, you know, that's divergent thinking. I would say they probably can. You know what, they probably, that's a really great suggestion. I think they can. They can see what they have, look how to design it. They could probably design it better, to be honest with you. That's great. One more question, sir? Meaning physically serve it? Or how do you get away with it? Okay. I can't tell you that. I'll tell you when that stops rolling. Listen, you know, there's the line, right? And then you go up to it, and then you just go around it, and you keep going. So that's how you do it. You know?
Thank you so much, Dr. Hynes.